Everybody, welcome.
Okay.
Welcome, everyone. We're just going to give it a little time to bring everybody in from the waiting room and give people a chance to get logged on. Everyone, welcome. We'll get started in just a minute. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm going to give it 30 more seconds or so. I like to see the numbers slow down and get everyone a chance to get settled and get in. All right, let's get kicked off. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're so excited to be with you today to really launch our regional SERF application efforts, and really appreciate you all signing in and joining us this afternoon as we start to really think about how we want to build that vision together. So my name is Evan Schmidt. I'm the CEO of Valley Vision. Valley Vision is a civic leadership and nonprofit organization. We're located in Sacramento, but we're very much regionally facing. And it's our mission to create livable communities in our region. And we do that through advancing economic prosperity, environmental sustainability, and social equity. And we always really keep focused on that triple bottom line, no matter what it is that we're doing. As you can see on our title slide here, we're here to talk about the Community Economic Resilience Fund. And we'll start with a little bit of our goals and agenda so that you know what we're going to be doing today. So we're here to really take a deep dive into the planning phase application requirements. So we're going to do a presentation on that and really make sure that everyone's familiar with the application, with what those requirements are. We're going to do some welcome and introductions. And the first thing I'd ask you to do, and I see it already happening, is to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat with your name and your organization and maybe where you are in the region. We'll spend a little bit of time on our goals and going over our agenda like we're doing right now, go through our application process, talk about an overview of our regional efforts, talk about what it would be to participate in the application process, and then get on to the next steps and how we're really thinking about poising our region to get our application in and be successful by a due date of July 25th, which is when the SERF application is due.
Are female. Accordingly, he is harassing them because of sex and or gender.
And if you're able to mute, please do. We've got a lot of people on the line, and so we want to make sure that everybody can hear. So I'm hearing some background noise now, so if you're not muted, please go ahead and do that. All right, thank you. So we're going to be talking about SERF. SERF is a huge opportunity for our region, and we're going to get into the details of what this program is. But just to give the headline of it, SERF is a $600 million statewide program focused on deploying money in regions to support regional inclusive economic growth and development. This is a completely new program from the state, and it's new for our region, it's new for the state, and it's really a new approach to thinking about economic development. It is more community voice oriented than we've really ever seen in any programs that are supporting economic development. It's far more ambitious, really, and you'll see the map, but really dividing our state into 13 different regions and really pushing us to think about our large regional system and how it is that we want to thrive and grow and build equity and inclusion and growth. And again, if you're not muted, please go ahead and mute. So, you know, to set the stage, one thing I want to say, this is new and different. It's new and different for the state. It's new and different for us. There isn't a playbook for it. So we're really building this together as we launch into this thing. So it's really exciting. It's going to be challenging. And this is really the kickoff of our deep dive into how is it that we're going to submit our regional application. I wanted to talk a little bit as the regional applicant, as Valley Vision is planning to be, talk a little bit about what we're bringing into this as some of our core values and vision. So first of all, it's our goal to really create a container for co-owned solutions across diverse people and diverse sectors across our entire region. So this is, you know, it's not a Valley Vision effort, it's a regional effort, and we really want to create that container. And a meeting like this is to that purpose. You know, we really wanted an open invitation meeting and to really outreach and communicate that this is happening and allow people to opt into this process. We're centering the efforts around disinvested communities and the creation of and access to quality jobs. So really important, that piece of inclusion of economic development is incredibly important as part of this program. And we are laser focused on how are we really looking at those historically disinvested communities and populations and creating opportunities that speak to their needs and that enable people to reach their full potential. And then finally, by the end of this process, the SERF planning process, we want to have built an investment strategy that will build a more equitable and sustainable region, and we want to be poised for implementation. So what we're talking about today is the planning phase of this grant, but there's also an implementation phase, and there's significant resources on both ends to be able to do this planning together and then to be able to implement some of our key priorities. So as we come through this, we want to have a really clear investment strategy that is actionable and that will really result in impact and results for our region. And I do want to note, as we're getting into this, at this stage, we're planning how we will plan. We're getting ready for a planning grant. So we are going through this process to create our application, and we're going to talk in more details around what that looks like. But I want us all to remember, we don't have to build the whole ship right now. We have to get started in the process. We have to kind of build the beginner part of our container. And then we're going to have a lot of time and capacity within that planning process to really fully flesh out some of those core plans. Again, if you're not on mute, please make sure that you've muted. So I think that's just important to remember as we're building this framework together. So it could be, for example, that everyone who needs to be in this meeting isn't here today, but there's still opportunities to engage because we're kind of building this as we go, and we're planning to plan. So, so important that we're building the capacity, but know that we're not going to do it all before July 25th. So with that in mind, in terms of setting the stage, I just want to note, and you've seen here that there's a very collaborative thread through this. Collaboration is very important. And to demonstrate the commitment to a regional and inclusive SERF effort, I wanted to invite a couple partners and regional leaders to welcome you and touch upon their vision for the SERF opportunity as well. So I want to start with James Corliss. He's the Executive Director of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, or SACOG. He focuses every day in our 6-county region, supporting sustainable and equitable infrastructure and communities. So James, I'll let you say a few words.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks so much, and good afternoon, everybody. Great to see such a big group on the call today. One of the things that I'm really focused on and excited about the SERF opportunity is the sort of the combination of sort of high road workforce, good jobs, and low carbon economy, and where those two things really, I think, can come together in our greater Sacramento region, as my little logo here suggests, like across all the counties, and in this kind of state version of our mega region, if you will, is really around the transition to zero emission clean transportation. And so we're already, I think, at the forefront, really a national leader for lots of reasons. around moving to electric vehicles, but there's so much more that we can and have to do. The California Mobility Center is part of trying to stand up a whole sort of supply chain and incubator approach to the next generation vehicle technologies. But we're going to have to, in the state of California, in this region, move to electric vehicles, clean fuel transit buses, electric micro transit shuttles running around the region, electric bike share, clean trucks, hydrogen fueling centers, and electric trucks. And all of that will require infrastructure for people to build, but it will require a lot of labor and the workforce and the skills to actually maintain it, put it in place and maintain it and operate it. That's a huge opportunity for the workforce piece. It's a huge opportunity in my mind for partnerships with community colleges, and that's a really big part of our regional prosperity strategies, this kind of advanced mobility, clean and green mobility, with a huge emphasis on equity, a huge emphasis on both workforce and making sure that lower income communities and communities of color stand to truly benefit from those investments, both in terms of users of the system, but also in terms of the jobs and skills. So I think that's really an exciting potential piece of this. And I think we already have a great foundation that this region has laid around advanced mobility and green transportation. And I just think it could really take off with this SERF grant. So thanks, Evan.
Thank you so much, James, and really, really helpful and important to think about where are those opportunities for our region and how do they fit squarely within that SERF vision. And so that idea of an equitable and low carbon economy, that particular sector is certainly of high opportunity for this opportunity. So thank you, James. That's great, and appreciate you chiming in and welcoming people to the call here. Next, I'd like to introduce Kim Williams. She's representing the Sierra Health Foundation. The Sierra Health Foundation is taking very important actions to build community capacity, not only to be responsive to this opportunity, but overall to build healthy and resilient communities, and really tune into how is it that we create a collective impact approach to inclusive economic development. So Kim, thanks for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Kind of pitch hitting for Chet today. He was very sorry he was unable to make it. And I just wanted to just share, I think from our perspective in the work that we've been doing, I think we see this as such a unique opportunity for the region coming down from the state, and to really focus on equity and inclusive economic growth, and to really serve our communities that honestly get left out of a lot of these opportunities. And how do we really build up those communities this time around, and really to begin really looking at how to level the playing field for everyone. I think what we hope for, and some of you may have seen that part of Sierra Health's initiative to support this work has been the Community Economic Mobilization Initiative, where raising funds to really help support what often happens in this kind of work. A lot of organizations that do really meaningful and powerful work get left out because they often maybe don't have the capacity, aren't at the table, need supports in order to help do the lift. And so this fund is going to really help to mitigate a lot of those issues and really help bring those organizations into the work, and so that they can really do the work in those communities. And I think that's going to be important. But I think this is this is a game changer to do something different, do it right, the first time out that we have a chance, and really focus on what equity really truly means throughout our region, and how do we really target those communities, bring in the jobs with the workforce, bring in the transportation systems, bring in the economic growth, so that we can create sustainable models throughout our region that will also allow for historical generational wealth to be garnered within our communities that, again, don't often get that opportunity. And so this is a chance for us to really make those kind of moves. And so we're excited to be a part of this, but we're also going to be extremely vocal and making sure that we don't forget about equity and what that looks like, and how we can stay true to that. So again, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Kim. Really appreciate you being here and talking us through, what does it really look like to bring about inclusive economic development? And it really is, it's the capacity building, it's being equity centered, it's looking at the communities and the people that have been left behind in the past. So thanks for sharing that perspective. And I hope having James and Kim here kind of share their unique perspectives sparks imagination for other people as we go into talking more about what this opportunity is and what the application process will be like. And, you know, those are two voices among, I see we have 64 people on the call right now. So all important partners here, including people from across our expansive 8-county geographic region, from a variety of different types of sectors, including community-based organizations, government, educational institutions, labor, and plenty of others. So I just want to acknowledge that we have a diversity of interest and voices that are here on this call, and even that are not on this call, but will get involved in the future. So so thrilled to be able to start with a couple, and there's plenty more to come on that and plenty more to hear from you all. So with that, I think maybe we'll go back to the slideshow and get into more of the details of the CERF program. All right, Isa. All right. Thanks, Isa. And so Isa Avansanya, who is our project manager of research and policy, is going to take us through the CERF program. Thank you, Isa.
Thanks, Evan. And hi, everybody. Really good to see everyone on the call this afternoon. Thank you for making the time to be here and be part of this. So just to recap of the basics of the CERF program. So it is a one-time use of state general funds that will distribute $600 million to 13 regions across California. The map you're seeing on the slide is in front of you is how they've divided up the state into those 13 regions. This purple block over here, hopefully you're seeing my arrow, is our CERF designated 8-county Sacramento region, which includes Sacramento, Sutter, Yolo, Yuba, El Dorado, Placer, and Colusa and Nevada counties. So the CERF program has kind of three really key objectives. The first one is to promote equitable and sustainable economic development. The second is to do that by supporting inclusive economic planning that prioritizes equity, job quality, and sustainability. And the third is to be able to align and leverage other sources of federal and state funding to be able to maximize economic resilience. The CERF program is divided into two key phases, the planning phase and the implementation phase. The planning phase is what we are focusing right now on in this call. So for the planning phase, each of the 13 regions will get up to $5 million for planning. I'll talk a little bit more about what the outcomes of that planning phase is. And then in the second phase, the implementation phase, regions compete for the remaining approximately $500 million to fund projects that, initiatives or projects that emerge from the planning phase. Okay, so at a high level, the planning phase of the CERF program seeks two main outcomes. The first one is the High Road Transition Collaborative, or collaborative as we're going to be calling it moving forward. This collaborative is made up of these inclusive and equitable tables or planning tables, each of which are made up of these strong sustainable partnerships among different stakeholders and community groups and community members. And then the second big outcome or deliverable from the planning phase is the actual regional economic plan. So I'll go into a little bit more detail on what that includes, but essentially it's two things. It's an analysis of current regional economic conditions, as well as the strategies that have been identified for economic recovery and transition. So two sort of main deliverables coming out of the planning phase, the collaborative and the plan. So a little bit more on that first piece, the collaborative. So as I said, the collaborative refers to the inclusive planning groups that should include balanced representation from the list you're seeing in front of you. This is definitely not exhaustive, but it includes labor, business, community, government, and local jurisdictions, indigenous communities, economic development partners, philanthropy partners, education, workforce, and others. The second deliverable of the planning phase, as I mentioned, is the actual regional economic plan that the collaborative is supposed to come up with. So the regional economic plan has kind of two key pieces. First is the kind of what we're calling like a background piece, which includes sort of vision and goals for the region, stakeholder mapping, stakeholders included in that make up the region, as well as several different levels or kinds of analyses. These include, for example, industry cluster analyses, SWOT analyses, labor market analyses, public health, demographics, and all these sort of vision, stakeholder, and analyses pieces are meant to inform then the second big piece of the regional economic plan, which is the strategies and background piece. So the strategies piece would outline, the strategies piece of the regional economic plan would outline, for instance, how are we going to grow our targeted industries? How are we going to increase economic diversification? How do we plan to respond to economic shocks? How are we going to increase economic equity as well as health and environmental equity? And how are we going to align all these different strategies with existing state goals around other priorities, for example, climate, air quality, and others. So that's an overview of sort of what needs to come out of the planning phase. Next, I'm going to shift into talking about what do we need to, or what are the requirements of the application for this planning phase grant? So essentially, what are the deliverables that we need to come up with between now and July 25th, which is the deadline for the application for our region? So you're seeing an outline here in front of you. I'll go over it at just a high level. So it's essentially 5 big pieces that they're looking for in this application. The first is a concept proposal, which is essentially sort of vision and goals for that collaborative. The second is a proposed work plan. So a list of kind of, or an outline of the proposed activities that are going to go into advancing that vision and goal. The third, really important, an outreach and engagement plan. So these refer to the strategies and methods that will be used to inform, engage, and empower residents and key stakeholders. Closely related to that outreach and engagement plan, and another really key piece to this is what they're calling the collective partnership agreement letter. So the collective partnership agreement letter would include a proposed government structure, as well as signatures of the initial collaborative members. So the initial group that is kind of coming together to build this or to participate in the planning phase, they will sort of everyone will kind of co-develop and sign on to this collective partnership agreement letters that kind of outlines what the collaborative is agreeing to do. And of course, that list of partners would also grow in the planning phase as more people are getting brought into the process and more people are getting involved in the process. And finally, the last piece, application package exhibits. This includes things like a statement of willingness, budget requirements, among others, sort of a detailed tracking of the different kinds of community engagement that have been done leading up to the planning phase, among other different exhibits and appendices that we'll have to attach. So again, this sort of like the big 5 things that we need to put together between now and July 25th. A couple of things, I won't go too deep here, but a couple other things I want to point out for everyone. Some guidelines around the use of funds for the planning phase. You have it listed here at a high level, allowable use of funds, which include research, data planning, and communication tools, participation compensation, community outreach and engagement, and consultant fees. And then also you have some unallowable uses of funds. So expenses not related to the CERF planning efforts, as well as general operational costs that are not directly related to CERF planning efforts. And then finally, briefly, here's some of the scoring criteria and the reporting that is going to be required by this application. So scoring criteria for the application, the things they'll be scoring us on are the objectives and vision that we outline, the capacity, high road elements, the project plan, and the government structure. And then in the planning phase, again, really quick brief outline of the reporting requirements. These would include monthly and quarterly reports, a planning phase final plan, a regional summary report, a lessons learned report, and an evaluation report. And then very briefly, you're seeing here in front of you the timeline for the planning phase. A couple of dates I'll highlight. So the notice of funding officially came out last week, I believe it was Thursday on May 26th. There's going to be an informational webinar on June 13th, where the state will sort of answer questions, any questions folks might have around the notice of fund or the solicitation. And then the deadline to submit the application, as we said, is July 25th. And we'll make sure this PowerPoint is available after so folks can do a deeper dive into these different slides. Okay, so now that we've talked about the planning phase and the requirements for applying for the planning phase, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the existing assets that we have in our SERF designated Sacramento region that help kind of set us up for success in this SERF process. And the first thing I want to touch on is our regional and sub-regional economic development strategies. So this is something that the state has sort of noted multiple times as being really foundational to that SERF program. You're seeing some examples here on the slide. This is by no means exhaustive. And this goes back to, as I showed earlier on the slide, one of the requirements of the economic development plan is they have this whole list of analyses that include labor market analyses, cluster and sector analyses. And although there is more work to be done, the fact that we have these different regional and sub-regional economic development strategies means that we have done a lot of that kind of groundwork around looking at the strengths of our economy. We've done a lot of that data gathering around what are some potential high growth sectors, which brings me to the next slide. So these are some examples of things that we have kind of already been able to identify in our regions and subregions. Again, not an exhaustive list, and certainly there are other priorities that are going to be elevated as we move into the planning phase. But sort of our baseline of information is that we know that we have some of these high growth sector strategies. So for example, you're seeing on that left column, advanced manufacturing and mobility, food and agriculture, forestry and watershed management, as well as several others. And then we've also sort of identified some gaps or some barriers in our region that need to be addressed or that need strategies around them to move us forward in our economic development. So that includes, for example, closing the digital divide, so making sure folks have access to broadband devices, as well as folks are equipped with the necessary digital skills, barriers around or reducing barriers around creating a more business-friendly environment, different kinds of infrastructure limitations, and many others. Again, not an exhaustive list, but some examples. I'm going to pause there. I think we have some time for question and answer before we move on to the next portion of the agenda.
If you do have questions or comments, you can raise your hand or you can put them in the chat, and then we're going to just pause for a minute and I know that we've thrown a lot of information at you, so we want to give you enough time to digest and think. All right, I see our first question in the chat. What is the intended nexus between Valley Vision's SERF application and the regional broadband efforts? I know that our managing director, Trish Kelly, is on this call, and Trish, I think that you might have your arms around that answer.
Oh, thank you very much, Evan. Thank you, everyone. And as Isa mentioned, bridging the digital divide is a huge priority for the region. We have a broadband consortium that Valley Vision manages through funding from the Public Utility Commission. So we're in the process of reaching out to all of our jurisdictions to identify updated priorities, because speed thresholds have changed, which qualifies us for different kinds of funding. There is a great deal of money coming in from the state and federal agencies. And so we want to make sure that our region is ready and aligned to meet all of the areas from infrastructure to accessibility and affordability. And it's very much embedded in our regional strategy, but it's very much a part of our high road workforce partnership too, to make sure people have digital literacy and access for digital skills. So that's a quick overview, and please let us know if you'd like more information on that. Thanks, Evan.
Thank you, Trish. And I'm just going to kind of read down in the chat. And happy birthday, Trish.
Thank you.
So are we expecting competing applications for this region? I am not aware of any competing applications. And I'll move from chat and go to the raised hand, which is Norma Santiago. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Isa, when you were talking about the planning phase outcomes, and you're talking about the regional economic plans, and then you had shown that these sub-region plans, like the Tahoe Prosperity Center has one and all this. how do you see us being able to synthesize all this great information into a comprehensive regional plan? What's the strategy behind that, or what's the effort behind that?
Thank you, Norma. So I think that is sort of one of the kind of key activities that we're going to be kind of figuring out together when we move into the planning phase. You know, that is a really big piece of that planning phase, is like, I guess a word for it is kind of inventorying all the existing assets that we have. And these are really good assets, but then how do you kind of take that, combine it, and then also kind of create space as well for kind of other priorities to emerge and to seek out those other priorities. So yes, that is, it'll be a priority in the planning phase for us to kind of figure out exactly how we'll go about that.
So the grant would actually pay or help fund that effort, is that correct? So
That's
that at the end you have this regional plan, this regional economic development plan, right?
That's right. That's kind of one of the major activities that the planning money is supposed to fund.
And so then with your collaborators, like the many that we have here in the call, how are we going to channel our talents to anything specifically that we might want to help with as we start with this particular initial application?
Yeah. So Evan, I think that might be a good segue maybe into kind of the next portion where we walk through kind of the subcommittees that we have planned. I don't know if you've got other questions in the chat we want to address before moving on to that, but if not, I can transition over to that slide.
There's a few other questions in the chat, and thank you for those questions, Norma. They're really good ones, and I think we will flesh out some of that in a little bit in the next section. And I also want to keep grounding us into, for this application, we're planning to plan. We're planning for our planning phase, and there's going to be a lot of ability to kind of advance those priorities and go through that process together. The timeline shared was for the planning phase. Yeah, Thomas, yes, that's true. What's the timeline for the implementation phase? Isa, do you have off the top of your head what the adjusted date is for when the implementation phase starts?
I do not have the exact date off the top of my head. I know there's going to be a bit of, it's going to come right on the heels of the kind of planning period, which is about a 2-year period. I know there's going to be a little bit of overlap there. I'll find that exact month that they just updated and I'll put it in the chat to answer that question.
Great, thanks. Is the expectation that each region will receive a planning grant? So yes, so each of the 13 regions, they've basically articulated that they are planning on awarding a planning grant to each region. With that said, they have identified in the notice of funding opportunity that there is a minimum threshold criteria that you have to hit to be awarded. So, so certainly you have to cover all your bases. In some regions, there might be competitors in the same region and they'll only award one per region, but they are expecting to award each region. And then is there a required SERF plan template or minimum requirements, or do we propose that in our application? Joanne, I might ask you to say more about your question, but I will say that the NOFA that they've provided and some of this, like these both planning phase outcomes and the application requirements that they've outlined is what we have. They haven't shared templates or anything more specific around what the plan, around what they're asking us to do with the plan. Does that answer your question, Joanna? And is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, it does. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just sometimes with these programs, like they put out like a table of contents, and so then you kind of know what you're aiming for. I just wasn't sure if we had anything like that.
Yeah, and this is kind of getting back to one of those context setting messages of this is a brand new program, brand new activities, brand new kind of focus and breadth for the state to take on, and it's a very ambitious program for them. So so I'm sure they're learning as they go, as we are, and we certainly are poised to provide feedback and kind of make sure that there's a dialogue that's really alive with our with the program officers. Okay, I don't see any more questions coming in or more hands up, so we can go ahead and talk about this next piece, which is, so we've kind of gone through what the application requirements are, what we're driving towards the end of the planning phase, so what outcomes we need to deliver. And so I want to talk a little bit about what our process of forming this application looks like. And I'm going to go through maybe some considerations for you, and then also just kind of our work plan over the next couple months. And so you can start thinking about how you might want to participate, and we'll give you an opportunity to articulate that. So I first just want to talk about participating in the application process, because what I'm about to lay out is a pretty robust meeting schedule and quite a lot of activities. And I want to acknowledge that when, to develop a grant is not a funded activity, not for us and not for any of you. And so we want to be realistic about expectations. We certainly want people's participation, and we want to make it really, really realistic for people. But I want you to be able to understand kind of what does it mean to participate or to not participate in this application process. So, participating in the application process will provide you with a meaningful opportunity to shape our region's application and priorities. So, going back to some of our core values, we're here to kind of set that container and to help facilitate the process for us to develop a collective vision. And in order to do that, we have to all be working on it together. So certainly we want to make that, we want to meaningfully engage with you all and really have you participate and get your input. There will be opportunities for funding and capacity support that align with key strategies. And some of these will depend on the decisions and priorities that emerge as part of the collaborative. So we're going to go through this process over the next 2 months. We're going to identify some activities and some of the priorities, more to come in the planning phase. And certainly there's opportunities for funding, but noting with 69 different stakeholders right now on the line, it's possible you could go through the application process and there isn't funding on the other side, but certainly it would be our hope and goal to create as much of a distributed funding model as we can. Also want to note, as we're forming this collaborative, and this collaborative is one of the outcomes they're looking for as part of the outcomes of the planning process. That's part of the capacity support to do this work, is supporting people to participate in the collaborative. So there is some degree of funding participation there. So I want to just note that people will be supported as we get into the planning phase and think about how we're doing the collaborative. And then finally, participating also is a commitment on your part, and we'll ask for some commitments. So first of all, we'll really ask you to share SERF-related information with your partners and networks. When you have an 8-county, a large regional effort like this, we know that we can't always get everybody all the time. So you all represent diverse and robust communities all over the region. So we ask that you help there. And then we'll get to a place in our planning phase, or in our application planning phase, where we'll potentially ask you to sign on to the collective partnership agreement letter, and to really be one of those folks that are helping build the partnerships and really creating more concrete commitments and sign-ons as part of the collective. So I hope that's somewhat clear, and maybe it'll become more so as we get into the activities of the application process. So I think we're ready for the next slide. Okay, so in our short time frame that we have to develop our application, we've been thinking about 4 different types of buckets of activities that need to be shaped and formulated and represented on our application. And so in order to do deep dives into each one of these, we would like to form some subcommittees so that we can have potentially a smaller group, to really have kind of some working groups and some working time together so that we can dive into each one of these. So the first one that's listed here is data research and evaluation. So the charge of this subcommittee will be to summarize, or to think about how we will summarize our current economic and community conditions, identify economic growth opportunities and metrics for evaluation, start thinking about an inventory of what our regional projects and assets are that will lend to the SERF effort, analyze existing research data and economic development assets. And to be clear, this is something to identify where it is in the application phase, and then some of that work will be done certainly in the planning phase, to advance and summarize required analyses, and to identify themes and buckets. So kind of some of our prioritized themes that maybe themes that come across all of our different economic development plans and things like that, so we can start to shape our ideas about how research can help drive our actions in the planning phase. And please make sure that you remember to mute. We're getting some background noise. Thank you. Okay, so that's one subcommittee. Next, backbone support and governance. So one thing that they are asking for as part of the application is for us to express our governance structure. So that's both kind of our org chart for CERF, and also how we'll be making decisions and kind of what models will we use for that. So that subcommittee planning group will be focused on how we're setting planning tables, how we're forming and managing inclusive regional governance structures that support decision-making. They'll be looking at existing governance models, so looking at other places and other projects that might have good things for us to learn, and then really developing a structure and a method of governance. And so that is one of the tangible things that we have to articulate during this application process. Third subcommittee is community engagement and outreach. So we want to set a vision for engagement and representation. We want to think about our target communities. So the CERF, the program description itself really talks about census data that either are in Cal EnviroScreen or are 80% or more hitting the definition of poverty. And so, we'll want to be kind of looking at those maps and really thinking about how are we through engagement and outreach, making sure that we're focused on those areas. We'll want to think about the appropriate methods for engagement, including potentially survey, focus groups, interviews, forums, events, engaged research, and other things that we would like to integrate into the planning phase. And I think we'll want to lean on all of you and other specialists to really help think through that. And then finally, a really important one, capacity building and technical assistance. So this subcommittee is really going to be thinking about how do we increase capacity for community-based organizations to participate and assist regional entities in not just in business plans, but also in the collaborative itself. So how are we really helping create that capacity? What kind of technical assistance do we need? Do individual organizations need? But also, do we need as a collaborative? Like, where do we want to look at the models of how we want to learn together and operate CERF? So really be thinking about that as well. And including looking at methods for capacity building, existing initiatives where it's already happening that we could support and grow. But really thinking about how do we build that regional capacity that we need to be successful in this initiative. So those are the 4 subcommittees that we've identified and are looking to activate over the next 2 months. So this is kind of just a description of how we're envisioning our work plan for each one of these subcommittees. So starting again with research and evaluation, we're imagining a half-day workshop during, we're actually at the last week of June and the first week of July, but kind of the end of June, beginning of July, to be able to have an organized way of diving into all of those items that I just mentioned when we're thinking about research and evaluation. Next, on community engagement, again, kind of the same model. We're planning a half-day workshop in that same time frame, and I'll say the same about capacity building and technical assistance. So I realize it's not enough time to fully develop these plans, but again, to remind us, right now we're planning to plan. So we're setting the stage for what we're going to do in the planning phase, and really getting meaningful guidance, leadership, and input from the region at large to be able to do that. And then finally, with the governance committee, but with the governance structure, we're imagining a little bit of a more involved process, because this is something we really do need to articulate during the or in our application. And I personally think it's going to be a challenging piece of this. So we're imagining 3 to 4 meetings starting probably in a couple weeks, going into kind of early July. So that's the concentrated, content-oriented subcommittee engagement that we're imagining that's going to inform the application. Thinking about what the subcommittees are going to help inform. I think we'll probably want to do a charter per subcommittee so we can kind of articulate where they're going to plug in. We want to the subcommittees to think about a scope of activities that would achieve what we mentioned in the slide above. And then we also want to start thinking about the budget for these types of activities. So that's the subcommittee deliverables. I also want to note for Valley Vision, we're going to be really focused on documenting everything that we're doing and making all these planning activities and resources available in a very accessible and transparent way. So we will send the link out to you all, but on our website, we're going to have all of our recordings, all of our slides, all of our meeting notes, just so that everybody can really access all things SERF anytime you need it, because we do want to make plugging in easy for you. I will note that we're really utilizing surveys, because I think that can be an easy way for you all to give individualized feedback, to express how it is that you'd like to participate. So we are going to have one at the end of the slide deck. We'll have one to link for you so that you can express interest that you might have in joining a subcommittee. But throughout the process, we'll make surveys available so that you can always offer input in that way. And then finally, a big piece of the activity of this process leading up into the application is developing this collective partnership agreement letter. And that's really going to be articulating a lot of the agreements that we come up with in the subcommittees. So really kind of showing the beginning part of our vision for this initiative, talking about how we're going to deploy across those different functional categories, and demonstrate commitment out for our participants that we're all kind of committed to what we identify. So that is kind of what we're planning in terms of our workflow for our next steps. And I see some questions already coming up, so I'll pause there and address some of these questions. Kiara says, have the subcommittee meetings already been scheduled, or are these happening as early as next week? No, they're not happening as early as next week. They have not been scheduled, but we are looking to, once we get a sense of interest from you all and who's going to participate, we are looking to schedule these like early next week. So we're imagining the half-day sessions, we're going to push those out as far as we can, like so kind of to the end of June, in hopes that people can participate. And we'll do our best to kind of work with people's schedules for the subcommittees that you're interested in. Is the intent to have subcommittees active through the submission date on the 25th or through the entire SERF planning phase? The hope is through the entire SERF planning phase. I think we're starting to build our collaborative. So it's kind of a, opting into what you're interested in doing over the next 2 months, fleshing out what that looks like for you and what it looks like for our SERF priorities. And then, a process of selecting in according to what some of, what comes out of the subcommittees and what comes out of the process. I see a couple more questions in chat, but I also see Wendy Tyler's hand up. So Wendy, I'll turn to you. Wendy, are you there?
There we go. Couldn't unmute. Sorry about that. So thank you, Evan, very much for pulling this together. I guess, so this is kind of a bit off topic, but as you're talking about setting up subcommittees and things like that, as I scroll through the chat and see the folks who are participating on this call today, I noticed that from Colusa County, it appears that the only folks involved thus far is our county organization. So I'm a little concerned about what kind of outreach has been done thus far by Valley Vision in our county. And as the county administrative officer, I don't know that I have the time to commit. The other person on the call is my community development director. So certainly, we're happy to, I think, to help. I can't speak for him, but I mean, I'm really concerned about level of participation from our county, just not the county organization, but geographically. So what outreach has been done, and is there an opportunity to engage some of those other folks to participate on these committees?
Yes, thank you, Wendy. And we should have included this on the slide. So one part of activities that's going on is a Colusa specific stakeholder meeting in person in Colusa and ISA. I know we've I think started to formulate a date for that. So if you have that on hand, maybe you could share it. Really recognizing, Wendy, that Colusa has been outside of our 6-county kind of framework that we have. It's going to require special attention and outreach and even maybe, kind of subcommittee or regional level activities to make sure that we are doing the outreach and engagement that's needed. So I would say what's been done so far is not enough, but we really are, we're really poised and thinking about how do we meaningfully create that on ramp and be sensitive to the specific needs in Colusa County. So I'd be happy to connect with you more, make sure that date works for you, and then we're working on kind of creating that meeting and making that happen.
Right. I think we're looking at sometime in, I think late June, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not positive, but yeah, I just want to make sure that we have I don't want to say significant representation, but a breadth, if you will, of representation of our community involved in this process. So I appreciate the acknowledgement of that, and we'll look forward to meeting and having that stakeholders meeting here in Colusa.
Good, thank you, Wendy. We are too. Okay, going back to the chat. Oh yeah, I read that one. You envision much work by the committee members between the meetings. We'll try not to. I'm not sure how to answer that, Thomas, because we haven't completely figured out the design of that. But our hope is to not burden you with lots of extra work, but to do as much as we possibly can in those meetings themselves. Kiara, I see your comment, and I totally agree with you. And one of the reasons that we're starting with this meeting, which was a lot of outreach and an opt-in, but then I think we need to go to the next step of really more recruitment and more working on bringing people in, whether it's to the subcommittees or envisioning different types of engagement to make sure they're able to engage in it. One thing that we're going to get to at the end of our presentation is we're going to ask you who else should be here that isn't here. Because again, I strongly feel it's not just Valley Vision perceiving who we think the stakeholders are. It's really much bigger than that. So we're thinking about that too. I think that's something that we'll want to put a lot of attention to. All right, are there county representatives from other counties in this region? Sorry, Joanne, I'm not sure if I know what you mean.
I'm sorry, I was just tagging on to the previous comment around Colusa County, and I didn't know if there were any county representatives here.
From Colusa?
From any of the counties in the region. I represent Yuba Water Agency, but I don't see anyone from Yuba County here. I just wondered if there were any county staff.
I'm not sure. I will say that certainly we've had conversations included in outreach, and I think we're also working with some of our government partners to think about how are we engaging staff across all of our different counties. So I think we're thinking about meaningful ways to engage. James Corliss, I'm not sure if he's still on, has been active in that and helping kind of with electeds outreach, and we've done some work with our 6 county economic development directors, and I think there's more that needs to be done to kind of bring people on board.
Evan, just to note for Yuba County, Ian Brooks, who's the county's broadband lead, he's on the call, and I want to note that as part of our data gathering, we partners work in various efforts, including agriculture, broadband, sustainable ag land kind of projects. And so we're trying to get more information from across the region. We're working with all of the counties except Colusa and Nevada on those efforts. But as Evan mentioned, there's intentional outreach going on too. So we have avenues to try to at least bring more information in, but that's just to note that.
Thank you, Trish. I'll also note in terms of our kind of diverse geography, as in Colusa, we're planning an in-person stakeholder meeting for Yuba and Sutter. And then I know I saw Heidi on earlier. I don't know if she's still on, and Kristen York as well from Sierra Business Council, and sorry, Heidi Hildrum from Tahoe Prosperity Center. But you know, there's a Tahoe process going on as well. It's around kind of the Envision Tahoe economic development plan that's ongoing there, but really thinking about how are we creating some kind of sub-regional efforts to ensure that we have good representation across the region. All right. Yes, Devin, I see, I'm reading your note here that, and I will just note that I know that we will continue to do recruitment and outreach, and this is one of our hopes for you all to, as you lean into this process, to help us do outreach and help us get the right folks engaged as we hope that they would be. Maybe I missed this, but is there a set of guiding principles or values we're using to bring people together around a shared SERF application? That's a good question, Paul. I think that there's not a written out articulated set of values. The state has articulated a core set of values for the program itself. And I do think it would be valuable for us to be kind of vetting our own regional set of values. And, you know, because this is our kind of first deep dive into what's the application, what's the opportunity, I think we'll want to look for opportunities to be able to kind of do that together and be thinking about that together as we go from here. Oh, thank you, Heidi.
And I can jump in and answer a question someone asked earlier about the implementation phase timing. So draft guidelines for the implementation phase are going to be coming out as early as fall of 2022. That will be for folks to kind of review them, and there will likely be at least one, probably a few rounds of public comment on those guidelines. And then in terms of the actual solicitation for the implementation phase, most recent information from the state indicates that it'll be winter of 2023 is what that timing will be like. These are all still sort of not very specific deadlines, but that gives us a little bit of an idea.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we move to our next portion? Oh, Michael.
I figured I might as well get off mute for this question. So I assume that having an employer engagement in this process is going to be valuable. Do we want them to be on the subcommittees, to have that commitment on the subcommittees and during the planning process? And if so, what's the amount, number, ratio that we are looking for? Is there any thought behind that?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. So if on one of the slides that Issa shared, you know, there's a list of required participants and employers are certainly on there. So, you know, that is an important component of this collaboration of the work that we're doing together, is to bring employers in terms of, and Michael, you might have to help me remember and clarify, in terms of our application process, would love to bring employers in who are able. I'm sure we've had some on this call. If not, that'll be part of our recruitment efforts to be, you know, really thinking about not just representation in our region, but also the categories that have been identified by the program itself, which is employers, it's labor, it's education, it's workforce, it's community-based organizations, and others as well. So I think that yes, that will be really important. And then as we move into the planning phase, I think we'll want to really think about how we're cultivating meaningful engagement from employers. Okay, Issa, what's next on our deck?
So I'm going to pull it back up. Next is here. So as Evan mentioned earlier, we're going to be utilizing heavily these survey tools as we move through this process. So this is the first survey that we're going to have folks fill out after this session, or right now if you're able. I'm going to pop the link into the chat as well for folks who can't access it through the QR code. But this will take you to our subcommittee survey. It'll only take a minute or less to fill out. It'll ask for sort of just basic contact information, as well as ask about your interest in participating in one or more or none of the 4 subcommittees that we outlined. And then there's also a question that will allow you to just kind of put any other general feedback or comments you might have. So I'm going to, so you can scan that QR with your phone, or if you go to the link that I just put in the chat, it will take you to the same place. And encourage everyone as well to share this with your respective networks. As we said, we'll sort of have the slides and everything available to everyone very soon. But in the meantime, if you're able to share this link with your respective networks or anyone else you know might be interested in participating in this, please do.
And while you're going to the next slide, I'll note, Adrian, I see your comment about, basically helping support diverse individuals to be able to participate. And that would definitely be great. I do want to acknowledge the limitations during the as we're putting the application together. I mean, I think as we get into the planning phase, that'll be a key part of how we're thinking about community engagement. And I think in a short time frame with, it's going to be challenging here. So I think we'll certainly have to have some reliance on community representatives, so many of you. And then I also think that, again, we're planning to plan. So we're creating a framework in which there's enough space that we can shape priorities from that level of engagement, but not necessarily try to drag in, individual, members of their faith community or others who have a lot going on in their lives into the application process. But certainly, if anybody wants to participate, I would encourage it.
Okay, so the survey you all just clicked onto, that will continue to stay live. So feel free to fill that up either now or after or at any point. The next thing you're seeing in front of you, so we've already been doing quite a bit of question and answer throughout. Right now, obviously continue to raise your hand and ask your questions or put them in the chat if you prefer. We've also set up a Jamboard, which I'll click onto and walk everyone through on how to use it. What you're seeing at the bottom of the slides, we prepared sort of a couple of discussion questions. Folks are welcome to either speak up or use the Jamboard to give their answers. The two questions we have are, first, who else would you like to see represented in the application process? And second, what are the important essential qualities of a healthy, diverse collaborative? So I'm going to stop sharing this and start sharing the Jamboard just to walk everyone through it. I know some of us might be familiar with this tool. Well, first, let me actually share the link with everybody. So I just put a link in a chat, which will bring you to the Jamboard. When you click onto that link, it will take you to what you're seeing in front of you. A Jamboard is essentially like a virtual whiteboard. So there's two slides, one for each question. So if you see here at the top, you're 1 out of 2, you're currently on the first slide. And then if you click this arrow, it'll move you to the second slide with the second question. To type your answer, what you can do is over here on the left-hand side, here you have a sticky note. I find that's the easiest way to use this tool. So click on a sticky note and you can type in whatever you want. And then if you hit save, the sticky note will appear and you can kind of drag it wherever you'd like. So as I said, kind of like a virtual whiteboard, virtual bulletin board. If you're having trouble with this, feel free as well to pop your answers into the chat or speak up and I can go ahead and add them in here. I'm seeing some folks in the tool, so hopefully it's working well for everyone. And feel free as well to move back and forth between the two questions as you like. I'm going to take this off screen share so we can all see each other.
And Isa. And Isa, I'm wondering if there's an adjustment we could make on the fly. Going back to Paul's question, a set of guiding principles and values that we're using to bring people together around a shared CERF application. Mm-hmm. I think that looking at our second question here, what are the important essential qualities of a healthy, diverse collaborative? I think maybe that speaks to that question, but I would, or if we need to add another page to be able to get people's thoughts around kind of as we think about this collective regional effort, how are we really, what are the values and core principles that we want to really lean on as we do the work together?
Yes, I'm going to add a third. I do think it lines up a little with the second question, but I think I'm going to go ahead and add a third slide in case you have people populating that second one already.
And I see people populating the our first page here, so thank you for that great contributions. And if you're not able to get onto the Jamboard or you'd rather put things into the chat, please feel free to do that as well. And as you all are kind of identifying types of community members or folks that you'd like to see in the application process, if you have people, if you have specific people, you could put that on the Jamboard, or you can put it in the chat, or you could email us. But certainly, want to hear your if there's specific people that you'd like to bring in, and I'm seeing some coming into the chat, so thank you for that.
And did we want to open this Zoom whiteboard, or did I click that by accident?
I don't know anything about this.
Okay, I'm gonna put it down. I think I might have just done that accidentally.
All right, and I'm starting to see some things come in on what are the important essential qualities of a healthy, diverse, collaborative agreement on a culture of equity, possible build-in funding for partner DEI training, common goals and understandings about how we'll work together, a charter agreement, trust, equity, and shared language about what that means. These are all great. Humility, compromise. I know that we've already started to lose some people at the 5 o'clock hour, and this is really the last item that we have. So we were hoping that we wouldn't we weren't hoping that we wouldn't need the whole 2 hours, but we certainly thought that was a possibility. But I really, and we'll wrap up Jamboard here pretty soon, but I also really want to encourage people to fill out that survey. That's a really important way of how we kind of hear from you individually. And as we start to formulate subcommittees and kind of move forward and how we're doing our engagement, those survey tools are really important. And I see the comment here, we should be mindful to include existing collaborative efforts such as IPPS, Aggie Square, et cetera. Yes, absolutely. And I think we identified in the research team, although this could maybe nest in a couple of different teams, is of a bit of an inventory about where there's already things happening. Brenda, feel free to ask a question.
Brenda Ruiz with the Sacramento Food Policy Council, probably predict what I'm going to ask. So SB 1000 is the Planning Healthy Communities Act. It looks at and focuses and requires jurisdictions to address environmental inequities and harms as part of the general plan update. And the Food Policy Council has been working on the food access piece, which includes some assessment and an action plan. But do you think that there's a place in this to ensure that this very important piece that all jurisdictions are required to have and do, to say the built environment, you know, has effects on neighborhood health, and we need to invest and look at neighborhoods that are most harmed by environmental injustice, inequities, and undo those harms or invest in remedying those as part of planning how a region develops, what gets approved, what gets built, what investments are made. I hope that this would be inclusive of similar GPUs in the jurisdictions in the next couple of years, because now we have general plan updates where the jurisdictions are looking or starting to look at equity, including having working groups, having a way to develop an equity matrix whether as part of that process, or a way to include justice principles and all of these things. And now CERF comes with the dollars, and now these other projects and policies that are out there that are not funded. SB 1000 came with $0 from the state. So I'm hoping that this process there's a place to have some synergy to that work that is very in line with these environmental goals. And because I'm biased, you know, obviously I will be looking at food, and as part of the assessment and action plan, this is just for the county, for Sacramento, would be looking at, you know, opportunities for economic development and jobs in the food sector that have very strong synergies to environment. The other piece is SB 1383, also another requirement that all jurisdictions have to do that have really strong synergies with mitigating greenhouse gases and diverting organics out of landfills, and then identifying edible food that can then be redistributed. I could see a bunch of cars and a whole distribution team out there, you know, redistributing all this edible food, probably all driving gas vehicles. And with green tech education on a separate project, we've already modeled what it looks like to have electric cars be as the distributing model. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. I just hope that these two important pieces, SB 1000, SB 1383, that are requirements for all jurisdictions, can find a place in this effort.
Thanks for that feedback, Brenda. I also, you know, Brenda, I think going back to kind of some, you know, thinking about our guiding principles, that idea of remedying harm that's one place where we might think through, you know, how does that show up in the CERF framework for our region. All right. Are people still putting items into the Jamboards? I'm seeing we have a lot of ideas around who else needs to be represented. So that's super helpful. Thank you for that. And I know there's a lot of overlapping cards here, so we'll work on that in a more organized framework. And that might require some follow-up from us, reaching out about ideas that you have. And again, please reach out to us if you do have specific folks that we haven't surfaced yet. Really appreciating what's coming into the important and essential parts of a healthy collaborative. All voices are heard at the meeting. Equitable over equal representation, compromise, trust, humility, a lot of trust, actually. I see that in 3 different places. Respect. I think this is a really good framework for us to start kind of thinking about those shared principles, as is the next slide. In that specific question. So I'm seeing making sure we're remembering the sustainable aspect of the CERF, a commitment to action-oriented goals, no communities left behind, a community-based approach, speaking truthfully, environmental stewardship, centered on those most economically marginalized, inclusive, and others. So I think this is a great framework for us to start with, and for us to start organizing and framing back to you, so that as we're going through our subcommittees and our other activities that we're kind of socializing and honing our kind of core operating values. And I also think, as we're doing that work, then each subcommittee can be reflecting those things. So as we're thinking about a governance structure, how do we make those principles alive within that structure? So thank you for your input. And I'm gonna, I will first of all ask Isa, is there anything else that we need to make sure we address before we wrap?
No, I don't think so. Just a reminder to everyone again to fill up that survey. And I think Adrian just put the chat in the link in the chat again. So thanks to everyone for filling that out.
Okay, then I want to open the floor to all. Are there any last thoughts or questions that anybody would like to share? Okay, well, then you're going to hear back from us early next week. We're going to start, we're going to put out our schedule for how we want to, or how we're able to get those subcommittees framed in there. And I just really, the whole Valley Vision team, and a lot of us are here, all really thank you for being here tonight, and really appreciate your participation in this, and really excited to do this work together. It's a huge, ambitious project, but it's ours to make for our region, and I'm really excited about that. So thank you all, and looking forward to seeing you again soon.